Here's a question for you. When the room explodes with voices, when maps scatter like autumn leaves, when careers hang on split-second decisions, who do you trust? The brass? The protocols? Or the woman in civilian clothes sketching arrows in silence? Camp. Meridian buzzes with morning energy. Officers stride past recruitment posters showing determined faces and proud slogans. Combat boots echo against polished floors that reflect fluorescent lights. Coffee steams in ceramic mugs marked with unit insignias from a dozen different conflicts. The smell of fresh paint mingles with old leather and machine oil. Nash Hawthorne adjusts her plain khaki cardigan. No rank, no ribbons, no voice in the thunder of military hierarchy. She works in archives. Third floor, corner office with one small window overlooking the parade grounds. Her fingers trace topographical lines like a pianist reading sheet music. Each elevation mark tells a story. Each contour line holds secrets. For 3 years, she's cataloged every survey, every reconnaissance photo, every hand-drawn field report. The other staff see paper and filing systems. Nash sees the poetry of geography. Maps tell stories others cannot read. Elevation changes whisper about ancient rivers that carved valleys. Road networks reveal the flow of commerce and conquest. Drainage patterns show where armies will struggle. She sees patterns others miss. She understands terrain like others understand people. This morning feels different. Heavy, like the air, before lightning strikes. The coffee tastes bitter. The radio chatter sounds urgent. Even the pigeons outside her window seem restless. Colonel Marlowe Crane's voice booms down the hallway. Strategy meeting. Emergency session. All senior staff. Drop everything. Move now, Nash. Keeps her head down. Archive staff don't attend strategy meetings. They catalog. They preserve. They stay invisible in the machinery of war. Her job is documentation, not decision-making. Her voice doesn't carry weight in rooms where lives hang in the balance. But Major Briar Maddox appears in her doorway. Breathless. Urgent. Sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning cool. Nash, we need the Henderson Valley surveys the complete. Set from 1943, everything we have. Colonel's orders. Nash knows exactly where they are. Section G, Drawer 14, third subsection. She's organized this collection with mathematical precision. Every contour line memorized. Every access route cataloged. Every defensive position noted. The surveys are thick bundles. Yellowed at. The edges from decades of storage. Bound with faded ribbon that crumbles at her touch. The paper feels fragile, historical. These maps guided soldiers through battles her grandfather's generation fought. As she lifts them from their protective folder, something flutters. A loose sheet. Hand-drawn. Different paper entirely. Heavier stock. More personal. She pauses. Her heart skips. The handwriting in the corner reads, "For my daughter, may you see what others cannot see, know what others cannot know. With love and hope for peace. Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne, 1944." Nash's breath catches in her throat. Her mother's maiden name. Her grandmother's war service. The stories whispered over childhood dinners about a woman who read terrain like scripture. Who saved companies with her understanding of geography. Who died before Nash was born but left behind legends. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. The sketch shows Henderson Valley from an impossible perspective, not from any official survey point. This view comes from someone who walked those ridgelines in combat boots, who counted steps between landmarks under enemy fire, who understood that maps on paper and ground truth speak different languages entirely. Point 3. Arrows mark key positions, not where headquarters doctrine would place them, not where textbooks suggest, where someone who understood both terrain and human nature would place them. The arrows curve around natural obstacles. They follow hidden corridors. They exploit weaknesses only a soldier cartographer would notice. Nash studies the delicate lines. Her grandmother's mathematical precision translated into tactical genius. Her grandmother's battlefield intuition captured in India ink. Each mark deliberate. Each angle calculated. Each position chosen for reasons that transcend standard military thinking. Major Maddox calls from the hallway. "Hurry, Nash, they're waiting." Colonel doesn't like delays. Time is critical. Nash slides her grandmother's sketch between the official surveys. Hidden. Safe. Ready to reveal its secrets. Her hands tremble slightly as she carries the bundle. 60 years of family legacy walking toward a moment of crisis. The war room thrums with tension thick enough to cut. 12 officers around a mahogany table scarred by decades of urgent meetings. Digital displays showing satellite feeds that update in real time. Traditional paper maps spread like tablecloths across every available surface. The air smells of stress, sweat, and strong coffee. Colonel Crane presides from the head of the table. Silver-haired veteran of 3 conflicts. Command voice that's settled disputes and saved lives. 40 years of decisive leadership etched in the lines around his eyes. When he speaks, rooms fall silent. When he decides, armies move. The situation briefing paints a grim picture. Enemy forces have taken Henderson Valley in a surprise advance. Supply lines threatened along a 100-mile front. Evacuation routes compromised. Civilian populations at risk. Time running short with each passing hour. Captain Koa Rivers points to the main approach on the primary map. Standard flanking maneuver from the eastern ridge. Textbook execution. Predictable. Safe. Exactly what the enemy expects. Major Soleil. Baxter suggests comprehensive aerial reconnaissance. More data gathering. Delayed action until intelligence is complete. Risk mitigation through information. Safe thinking that costs time they don't have. Lieutenant Cassius Dean advocates waiting for reinforcements. 2 additional companies en route. Better odds. Reduced casualties. Status quo that lets the enemy strengthen their position. Nash sits against the wall in a folding chair. Invisible among the olive-drab uniforms and polished insignia. Listening to tactical discussions that dance around the obvious. Understanding truths that training manuals cannot teach. Each proposal follows established doctrine. Each plan checks institutional boxes. Each strategy avoids the uncomfortable truth she sees in her grandmother's sketch. They're thinking like generals when they need to think like the terrain itself. The terrain tells a different story than their satellites and textbooks. The elevation changes create natural blind spots that technology cannot see. The drainage patterns form hidden corridors that maps cannot capture. The rock formations offer unexpected vantage points that reconnaissance misses. Her grandmother understood this. Her grandmother lived this. Her grandmother sketched the solution 60 years ago. Colonel Crane's voice rises above the debate. We need decisive action, not endless analysis. Lives depend on this decision. American lives. The officers argue louder. Maps rustle like autumn leaves in wind. Fingers jab at coordinates with increasing urgency. Voices overlap in military chaos that solves nothing. Time bleeds away while they debate doctrine. Nash feels the sketch burning against her palm. Her grandmother's wisdom calling across decades. Her grandmother's courage challenging her silence. Her grandmother's legacy demanding action. What would you do? Stay silent and safe in your corner chair? Let procedure trump truth? Or risk everything for knowledge that could save lives? Nash Hawthorne stands slowly. Walks to the table on unsteady legs. Unfolds her grandmother's sketch with reverent hands. The room falls silent. 12 pairs of eyes turn toward the quiet woman in civilian clothes. 1 weathered piece of paper. 3 hand-drawn arrows pointing toward impossible victory. The silence stretches like a held breath. 12 decorated officers stare at Nash Hawthorne. At her cardigan that belongs in a library. At her civilian shoes that have never touched a battlefield. At her trembling hands holding a piece of paper older than half the men in this room. Colonel Crane's eyebrows furrow. His jaw tightens with the particular irritation reserved for protocol violations. Archives personnel do not interrupt strategy sessions. Archives personnel do not approach tactical displays. Archives personnel certainly do not unfold mysterious documents during crisis. Briefings. What is this, Miss Hawthorne? Nash's voice comes out smaller than she intended. Quieter than the whisper of air conditioning. Weaker than the rustle of maps. My grandmother's field sketch. From Henderson Valley. 1944. Captain Rivers leans back in his chair. The leather creaks. Like skepticism given sound. His smile carries the weight of 3 combat tours and 0 patience for civilian interruptions. Your grandmother? What does a 70-year-old drawing have to do with current tactical realities? Nash feels heat rise in her cheeks. The familiar burn of being dismissed. Of being seen as less than. Of having her voice treated like background noise. She was Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne. 4th Infantry Division. She mapped Henderson Valley. During the liberation of, Major Baxter interrupts with a laugh that cuts like shattered glass. Ancient history. We have satellite imagery, drone reconnaissance. GPS coordinates accurate to 3 meters. What could a sketch from the Stone Age possibly tell us? The other officers murmur agreement. Nods ripple around the table like dominoes falling. Nash watches her moment of courage crumble into familiar humiliation. Lieutenant Dean taps his tablet. Screen. We have real-time intelligence feeds. Thermal imaging. Communication intercepts. Why would we need a museum piece? Nash's hands shake harder. The sketch trembles like a captured bird. She wants to fold it away, to retreat to her corner. Chair. To become invisible again. But something holds her steady. A voice from childhood dinners. Her grandmother's words echoing across decades. Terrain doesn't change, sweetheart. Politics change. Technology changes. But mountains stay mountains. Rivers stay rivers. The land remembers everything. Nash straightens her spine, clears her throat, speaks louder this time. The eastern approach you're planning. It's obvious. Too obvious. The enemy knows you'll come that way. Colonel Crane's fingers drum against the mahogany table. Each tap a warning. Each beat a countdown to her dismissal. Miss Hawthorne, we appreciate historical curiosities, but this is an active combat situation requiring. The drainage pattern changes everything. Nash's voice gains strength from her grandmother's memory. From 3 years of studying every survey. From understanding terrain like others understand heartbreak, the spring runoff carved new channels. Your satellites show current water levels. They don't show where the water goes when it rains, where it pools when it floods, where it creates muddy death traps for advancing forces. She points to her grandmother's sketch, to markings that look like random scratches, to notations that make sense only to someone who's walked those ridgelines. Why grandmother mapped the seasonal variations. She understood that Henderson Valley becomes a different place every few months. What looks passable in summer becomes quicksand in spring. What appears as solid ground turns into a killing field when the weather changes. Major Maddox leans forward. His interest catches like kindling. Unlike the others, he spent time in field conditions. He's seen technology fail when nature intervenes. What exactly are you suggesting? Nash's finger traces the 3 arrows, each line drawn with mathematical precision, each angle calculated for terrain that exists beyond satellite feeds, not the eastern ridge. The northern approach through Miller's Gap. It looks impossible. Too steep. Too narrow. But that's why it works. Captain Rivers snorts dismissively. Miller's Gap is a hiking trail. You can't move tactical units through terrain like that. It's suicide. Nash shakes her head, her confidence growing with each word. Each connection between past and present. A hiking trail that connects to old logging. Roads. Roads that your current maps don't show because they were decommissioned in 1956. But the paths are still there. Overgrown but passable. Hidden but functional. She points to the second arrow, to a marking that looks like a child's doodle. My grandmother noted every cave system, every natural shelter, every place where forces could take cover. Stage supplies. Coordinate movements without being detected. The third arrow curves around what appears to be empty space. A void in the tactical landscape. Nothing significant on any official survey. And this is the key. Nash's voice carries certainty now. Authority borrowed from a woman who died before she was born. Wisdom passed through bedtime stories and whispered family legends. Hendricks Overlook. Elevation 2,847 feet. Perfect sight lines over the entire valley. One spotter there can coordinate the entire operation. Guide forces through the maze. Call adjustments in real time. The room grows quieter. Not dismissive silence this time. Thoughtful silence. Calculating silence. Lieutenant Dean studies his tablet. Cross-references elevations. Checks topographical databases. The elevation is accurate, but there's no road access. No way to get spotting equipment to that position. Nash almost smiles. Almost allows herself a moment of satisfaction. Maddox Creek runs right below the overlook. Follow the creek bed for 3 miles. It's concealed from aerial observation. Natural camouflage. My grandmother marked every boulder that could provide cover. Every bend that offers concealment. Colonel Crane's expression shifts. From irritation to curiosity. From dismissal to consideration. He's commanded long enough to recognize truth when it wears unexpected clothing. To understand that wisdom sometimes comes from the quietest voices. How do you know all this? Nash folds her grandmother's sketch carefully, returns it to its hiding place between official surveys. Her moment of courage complete, because I've studied every survey of Henderson Valley for 3 years, cross-referenced every report, memorized every contour line, and because my grandmother taught me that maps are just the beginning. The real intelligence comes from understanding what lives between the lines. The silence that follows carries different weight. Not mockery, not dismissal. Respect beginning to bloom like flowers after rain. Major Baxter reaches for his phone, starts making calls to reconnaissance units, to advanced scouts who can verify Nash's claims. Captain Rivers pulls up satellite feeds, searches for the hidden roads Nash described, for the logging paths that official maps forgot. Lieutenant Dean calculates approach times, supply requirements, tactical advantages of elevated observation. Nash returns to her corner chair. Invisible again, but different now. Changed by speaking truth. Transformed by honoring her grandmother's legacy. Colonel Crane studies the official maps with new eyes. Sees terrain instead of just coordinates. Understands that sometimes the oldest intelligence is the most valuable. The war room hums with renewed energy. Officers making adjustments. Planners revising timelines. Technology serving wisdom instead of replacing it. Nash watches from her corner. Her grandmother's voice whispering approval. Her grandmother's courage living on. 3 arrows drawn in. 1944 guiding decisions in a different century. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most important truths. Sometimes the oldest maps show the clearest paths. Sometimes a woman in civilian clothes holds the key to impossible victory. The question isn't whether Nash was right. The question is whether anyone was ready to listen. Colonel Crane looks up from the maps. His eyes find Nash across the room. His voice carries new respect when he speaks. Miss Hawthorne, we're going to need you to walk us through every detail of that sketch. Every marking, every notation, everything your grandmother knew about Henderson Valley. Nash nods quietly, ready to translate 60 years of tactical genius. Ready to let her grandmother's arrows guide modern soldiers home. The real battle was never about terrain. It was about having the courage to speak truth to power. About trusting wisdom that wears unexpected faces. About understanding that sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the woman everyone overlooks. Nash Hawthorne stands again. This time, the room listens. 3 hours later, Nash sits in the same corner chair. But everything has changed. The war room buzzes with controlled chaos. Radio chatter fills the air with coded coordinates. Officers lean over tablets showing real-time feeds. Her grandmother's 60-year-old sketch has become the blueprint for a modern military operation. Colonel Crane's voice cuts through the noise. Sharp, authoritative, transformed by the weight of Nash's intelligence. Reconnaissance confirms Miller's gap is passable. The old logging roads exist exactly where Miss Hawthorne indicated. Hendricks Overlook provides perfect sight lines. We proceed with her grandmother's plan. Nash feels pride and terror in equal measure. Lives now depend on arrows drawn by a woman she never met. On tactical genius passed down through bedtime stories. On her ability to interpret markings that exist between official history and family legend. Major Maddox approaches her chair. His earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. His voice carries the weight of impending action. Nash, we need you in the command trailer. To monitor radio traffic. To interpret any details we might miss. Your grandmother's perspective could save lives out there. Nash nods, knowing she's crossed a line. No longer invisible. No longer just an archives clerk. Now she's part of something larger than filing systems and organizational charts. The command trailer sits 50 yards from the main building. Banks of monitors showing satellite feeds. Radio equipment connecting to units scattered across 3 states. The nerve center where decisions become reality. Nash takes her position at a secondary console. Headset crackling with field reports. Her grandmother's sketch spread before her like a sacred text. The first units are moving through Miller's Gap now. Alpha Company advancing in single file. Each soldier carrying 60 pounds of equipment. Each step following paths her grandmother mapped during a different war. Nash listens to their radio chatter. Position reports. Terrain observations. The voice of experience translated into tactical reality. Alpha leader to base. Gap is narrower than expected, but passable. Requesting confirmation on route to logging junction. Nash studies her grandmother's notations. Tiny numbers penciled beside the main trail. Distance markers measured in combat boots. In steps taken under enemy fire, she keys her microphone. Her voice steady now, confident in ways she never expected. Alpha leader, continue 200 meters past the fallen oak. Look for a boulder shaped like a sleeping bear. Turn left at that marker. The junction is concealed behind natural screen. Copy that. Base. Bear-shaped. Boulder. Left turn. Moving now, Nash feels her grandmother's presence. Not supernatural. Not mystical. Just the comfort of inherited wisdom. Of understanding that courage can be passed down like eye color or musical ability. Hours pass in concentrated silence. Reports filter in from multiple units. Bravo Company establishing position at Maddox Creek. Charlie Company moving through the concealed approach routes. Delta Company setting up overwatch at Hendricks Overlook. Each confirmation validates another piece of her grandmother's tactical puzzle. Each successful movement proves that terrain doesn't change. That water still flows downhill. That mountain still casts shadows in predictable patterns. But then the radio crackles with different energy. Tension bleeding through encrypted channels. Something wrong developing in real time. Delta leader to base. We have a problem at the overlook. Enemy patrol spotted our approach. They're moving to cut off our retreat route. Requesting immediate support. Nash's heart hammers against her ribs. Her grandmother's plan working perfectly. Until human variables changed the equation. Until the enemy adapted faster than anticipated. Colonel Crane's voice fills the trailer. All units, hold position. Delta Company, report your status. How many hostiles? What's your tactical situation? The response comes through static. Strained voices carrying the weight of immediate danger. Base, we count at least 8 hostiles. Moving to flank our position. We're exposed up here. Limited cover. Limited escape routes. Nash stares at her grandmother's sketch. Searching for solutions in faded ink. Looking for tactical genius that can bridge 60 years. Her finger traces. The area around Hendricks Overlook. Following elevation lines. Reading the story the terrain tells. There? A marking she hadn't noticed before. So faint it's almost invisible. A tiny arrow pointing north. With notations so small she needs a magnifying glass to read it. Emergency egress. Devils. Chimney. Steep but safe. S.H. Nash grabs the magnifying glass from the map table. Studies the marking until its meaning becomes clear. Her grandmother had planned for exactly this situation. Had mapped an escape route that doesn't appear on any official survey. She keys her microphone. Voice urgent but controlled. Delta leader, check your 6 o'clock position. Look for a narrow gap between 2 rock formations. It should appear too small for human passage. That's your way out. Negative base. No gap visible. Just solid rock face. Nash closes her eyes. Tries to see the terrain through her grandmother's experience. Through the eyes of someone who mapped under fire. Who understood that survival sometimes depends on impossible choices. Delta leader, the gap is there. Hidden by natural camouflage. Move 30 feet north of your current position. Look for shadows that seem deeper than they should be. Trust the darkness. Long silence. Radio static mixing with Nash's rapid heartbeat. 60 years of tactical wisdom. Hanging in the balance. Base? I see it. Jesus, it's barely wide enough for one person. How did you know this was here? Nash feels tears she didn't expect. Her grandmother's courage reaching across decades. Her grandmother's preparation saving. Lives in a different century. Because someone who loved her soldiers more than her own safety mapped every possible escape route. Move your people through that gap. Single file. Weapons ready. The passage leads to a natural depression where you can regroup. Delta leader's voice carries new respect. Understanding that intelligence sometimes comes wrapped in family stories. That the most valuable tactical knowledge often exists outside official channels. Copy that. Base. Moving through the gap now. First man confirms passage. Tight fit, but doable. We're going to make it. Nash slumps in her chair. Exhausted by tension she didn't know she was carrying. Amazed by the weight of inherited responsibility. Grateful for a grandmother she never met. But somehow knows intimately. Colonel Crane approaches her console. his expression mixing admiration with something deeper. Recognition that Nash has become more than an archives clerk, more than a keeper of dusty records. Miss Hawthorne, that escape route isn't on any of our maps. Our most current surveys show solid rock in that area. How could your grandmother have known about a passage that modern reconnaissance missed? Nash folds her grandmother's sketch carefully, understanding finally why it was hidden between official documents. Why it waited 60 years for this moment. Because she didn't just survey the terrain, Colonel. She lived in it, slept in those valleys, fought in those hills. When your life depends on knowing every possible escape route, you find passages that satellites can't see. The radio crackles with confirmation. Delta Company successfully extracted. No casualties. Mission continuing according to plan. Nash's grandmother's tactical genius validated by modern warfare. Nash returns to her monitoring station, ready to guide more soldiers through terrain mapped by love, by dedication, by a woman who understood that the most important battles are won by preparation, by knowledge, by refusing to accept that any soldier should die for lack of information. The weight of legacy settles on Nash's shoulders. Not burden, gift. The understanding that courage can be inherited, that wisdom transcends generations, that sometimes the most important voice belongs to someone who died before you were born. Her grandmother's 3 arrows continue to guide modern soldiers, continue to save lives, continue to prove that terrain is eternal while everything else changes. Nash Hawthorne adjusts her headset, ready to translate 60 more years of tactical genius, ready to honor a legacy written in faded ink and unwavering love. The mission continues. The arrows point toward victory. And somewhere in the static between radio calls, Nash hears her grandmother's voice whispering approval across the decades. 6 hours after Nash first unfolded her grandmother's sketch, the mission reaches its climax. Radio traffic intensifies across all channels. Alpha Company in position at the valley floor. Bravo Company securing the northern approaches. Charlie Company flanking through the concealed routes. Delta Company providing overwatch from their extracted position. All units following arrows drawn in 1944. All movements guided by tactical genius inherited through bloodline and bedtime stories. Nash monitors the communications with growing amazement. Her grandmother's plan unfolding with mathematical precision. Terrain knowledge trumping technology. Human understanding defeating digital certainty. The enemy never expected an approach through Miller's Gap. Never anticipated forces moving through forgotten logging roads. Never imagined that 60-year-old intelligence could outmaneuver satellite reconnaissance. Colonel Crane's voice cuts through the radio chatter. Steady, confident, transformed by the success of unconventional thinking. All units, prepare for coordinated advance. Execute on my mark. Henderson Valley liberation commences in 60 seconds. Nash feels her heart hammering. This moment belongs to her grandmother, to Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne, who mapped these ridgelines under enemy fire, who understood that the best tactical intelligence comes from soldiers who live in the terrain they're trying to understand. The coordinated advance begins with whispered efficiency. Multiple units moving simultaneously, converging on enemy positions from directions that shouldn't be possible, following paths that exist only in family memory and faded ink. Nash listens to the reports flowing through her headset. Each confirmation, another validation of inherited wisdom. Each successful movement, another proof that courage transcends generations. Alpha leader to base. Objective secured. Enemy forces withdrawing. No friendly casualties. Repeat, no friendly casualties. The trailer erupts in controlled celebration. Officers shaking hands. Radio operators allowing themselves brief smiles. Mission success achieved through the marriage of old wisdom and new technology. But Nash feels something deeper than professional satisfaction. Connection across time. Understanding that she's helped complete something her grandmother started. That tactical genius planted 60 years ago has finally bloomed into victory. Colonel Crane removes his headset, approaches Nash's station with expression mixing gratitude and wonder. Miss Hawthorne, I need to understand something. How did your grandmother acquire this level of tactical knowledge? This isn't standard military training. This is genius-level terrain analysis. Nash looks down at the sketch, at markings that have guided modern soldiers to bloodless victory. at arrows that pointed toward impossible success. She wasn't just assigned to Henderson Valley, Colonel. She volunteered for every reconnaissance mission, every dangerous patrol, every assignment that required walking into enemy territory with nothing but compass and courage. Nash's voice carries pride she's never felt before. Connection to legacy she's only beginning to understand. The other officers thought she was reckless, taking unnecessary risks. But she wasn't being reckless. She was being thorough, learning terrain the way other people learn languages, understanding that maps drawn from safe distances tell lies. That real tactical intelligence requires getting close enough to count enemy heartbeats. Major Maddox joins the conversation, his respect for Nash's grandmother evident in his careful attention. What happened to her? How did she die? Nash feels familiar sadness mixed with newfound pride. Her grandmother's story filtered through family whispers, through half-told tales and uncomfortable silences. She didn't die in combat. She died trying to save other soldiers. Henderson Valley, December 1944. A unit got trapped in a surprise blizzard. Lost. Disoriented. Running out of supplies. Nash pauses, gathering strength from her grandmother's memory. From understanding that heroism sometimes wears quiet faces. My grandmother went after them. Alone. In weather that grounded all aircraft. That stopped all vehicle movement. She carried her maps and followed terrain she'd memorized. Found the lost unit. Guided them to safety. Colonel Crane's expression grows solemn, understanding the weight of inherited sacrifice. But Nash's voice grows quiet, reverent, heavy with family pain that's transformed into family pride. She got them out. All 7 soldiers. Brought them home alive. But the effort cost her everything. Hypothermia. Exhaustion. She collapsed 50 yards from base camp. Died holding her maps. Still trying to save people. The trailer falls silent. Radio chatter continuing in background. Victory celebration muted by recognition of ultimate sacrifice. Nash folds her grandmother's sketch with ceremony, understanding finally why it was preserved, why it waited 60 years for this moment. They buried her with military honors. But her tactical knowledge died with her. The Army classified her maps, filed them away, forgot that genius sometimes comes wrapped in unexpected packages. Major Baxter approaches with tablet in hand. His earlier skepticism completely transformed. Nash, we've been monitoring enemy communications. They're completely baffled by our approach routes, calling our movements impossible, supernatural. They can't understand how we knew terrain that well. Nash almost smiles. Her grandmother would have enjoyed that confusion, would have taken satisfaction in tactical success that transcends normal military thinking, because my grandmother didn't just survey Henderson Valley. She became Henderson Valley, understood it like other people understand their own homes, knew where every shadow fell, where every stream ran, where every rock could provide cover. Colonel Crane extends his hand, a gesture of respect between soldiers, between people who understand that courage takes many forms. Miss Hawthorne, on behalf of the United States Army, I want to thank you. And through you, I want to thank Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne. Her tactical genius saved lives today. Her sacrifice continues to serve. Nash shakes his hand, feels connection to something larger than herself, understanding that she's become keeper of her grandmother's legacy, guardian of tactical wisdom that transcends time. 3 weeks later, Nash returns to her corner office in archives. But the space feels different now, transformed by recognition, by understanding that sometimes the most important battles are won by people who stay invisible until the moment truth requires visibility. On her desk sits a formal commendation, recognition for exceptional service in support of tactical operations. The language carefully bureaucratic, the meaning profoundly personal, but the real recognition hangs on her wall. Her grandmother's sketch, professionally framed, mounted beside a photograph of Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne in dress uniform. A woman Nash never met, but now knows intimately. Nash studies the arrows that guided modern soldiers to victory. 3. Simple lines drawn by someone who understood that the most important tactical intelligence comes from love, from dedication, from refusing to accept that any soldier should die for lack of knowledge. Here's the question that started this story. When the room explodes with voices, when maps scatter like autumn leaves, when careers hang on split-second decisions, who do you trust? The answer isn't found in rank or protocol. It's found in understanding that wisdom sometimes wears civilian clothes. That courage can be inherited like eye color or musical ability. That the most important voice in the room often belongs to the person everyone overlooks. Nash Hawthorne adjusts her plain khaki cardigan, returns to cataloging surveys and preserving history. But she's different now, changed by speaking truth to power, transformed by honoring legacy that transcends generations. Her grandmother's 3 arrows continue to point toward impossible victory, continue to prove that terrain is eternal while everything else changes, continue to remind us that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most important truths. Nash files her daily reports, organizes her maps with mathematical precision, and waits for the next moment when 60 years of tactical genius might be needed again, because some arrows are drawn not just for immediate battles, but for wars that haven't been fought yet, for soldiers who haven't been born yet, for victories that exist beyond the horizon of current vision. Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne's legacy lives on, in careful markings, in inherited courage, in the understanding that love is the most powerful tactical advantage. That preparation transcends time. That sometimes the most important battles are won by people willing to walk into dangerous places. With nothing but maps and hope, Nash Hawthorne returns to her quiet corner office, ready to preserve more history, ready to honor more legacy, ready to prove again that archives aren't just about the past. They're about understanding that the past never really dies. It just waits for the right moment to guide us home. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe.